gorgeous humans. Good to be talking to you today. As always, I'm Riley, and this is Sex with Everyone. And today I am in Providence, Rhode Island, talking with Feluria, and we talk all about her asexuality and where she kind of fits on that ace spectrum, and also how she's a sex worker and how those two things go hand in hand in her world and how they make sense for her and what she gets out of doing sex work because she genuinely loves it. So I am really excited for you guys to listen into our amazing conversation today. As always, I do have a Patreon. You can check it out at patreon.com/sexwitheveryone if you in any way want to support what I'm doing and this podcast, if you're enjoying it at all. So please go check that out if you're interested. And yeah, let's fucking get into it, y'all. Please join me as I talk about sex with Feluria. It's awesome being in this random dog park with you right now.
Yeah.
In the middle of nowhere.
It's a cat park now.
It's a cat park now. Yeah. Obi is roaming around, climbing up trees, and happy to be untethered.
Yes.
Well, I'm super excited that you decided to do this with me.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I think you have a really cool story and like life experience, and I'm just really excited to talk more about that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I am nervous but excited as well.
Why are you nervous?
I don't know. I don't usually talk about myself that much, at least not in a public way like this.
Yeah.
So it is interesting.
Okay.
But I think it's good to have these kind of conversations. So I'm excited.
Okay, good. As long as you're excited on some level.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. Well, you've talked to me before about being asexual, and I would love to talk more about what that means to you.
Okay. So I consider myself to be on the asexual spectrum. I do experience some interest in sex, but I don't really experience a lot of sexual attraction to individuals. So what that looks like for me is that my body works. I can experience pleasure from sexual touch, but I'm not generally driven to have sex. I don't see people in a sexual way generally. I'm not, I don't watch movies with super sexy people, at least sexy according to my peers, and think like, damn, I would like to do something with them. I'm much more romantically oriented. And when I date, it is much more of a mental and emotional connection than ever a sexual connection.
So I know you have a couple partners. You're poly.
Yeah.
So you generally just don't have a very sexual relationship with them at all?
Yeah. Well, so I tend to find most of my interest in sex happens at the beginning stages of relationships when NRE is at its most heightened form. But most of the time it's based in curiosity for me. So I want to engage with my partners in every way that I can. And so for me, engaging in sexual activity isn't really driven by sexual attraction like it is for most people, but instead a desire to bond with people, to see sort of what they like, what they're interested in, how they respond. And once I have experienced those things with them, the curiosity goes away and I tend to not be as interested. I still have the capacity to engage in that activity with them, but at that point it's more of oh, well, you really enjoy action movies, and I don't, but I'll still sit and watch one with you.
Yeah.
Even though it's not really my thing.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like, okay, well, you like sex and it's kind of dull for me, but I'll still do it because it's something that you really enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
For myself, my libido like goes up and down a lot. And when I'm in that downswing of like really just not being very sexually like motivated at all, it can sometimes feel like obligatory to have the sex with a partner, or like, you know, just really difficult to like it causes problems. It's caused problems for myself at least. So I'm curious, like, if you have that like kind of obligatory feeling about it, or if it just is and you go about your day.
It took me a really long time to recognize that my interest in sex and my ability to be sexually attracted to people was different from other people's. And that caused a lot of issues for myself and my relationships. So for the majority of my life, adult life, I was engaging in sexual activity that did feel really obligatory. Most of the time because I thought that that's kind of what everyone did.
Yeah.
That women, at least like female-bodied and presenting people, were supposed to be sexual, and like that was kind of their point of being, especially in a relationship. And so I had a really hard time drawing boundaries and not feeling guilted into performing. And it wasn't until I started being able to name what I am, that I'm on the asexual spectrum, that I was able to start forming relationships and being honest from the very get-go that this is just something that is natural in me.
Yeah.
That I'm not weird or broken, or like, that it's not going to be a surprise, that it is something that happens in every relationship I'm in, that has nothing to do with the other person, and that I'm giving them advance warning. So if they're not into that kind of relationship, if they want a sexual relationship that lasts the whole duration, then I am not it for them.
Yeah.
And since then, it's been a lot easier to just, like, be like, no.
Yeah.
Like, if you want it as, like, an occasional thing, as a special thing I do for you, then that's fine. But it's not going to happen if I ever feel guilted.
Yeah.
Or like you, or like a partner sees me as broken or less than an equal partner, or like I am doing something bad to them.
Right.
Which a lot of my partners, before I had that verbiage or wordage, were treating me like. So definitely advocate for like being able to name and kind of describe what your natural patterns are at the beginning of a romantic or sexual interaction, so that you can kind of set the groundwork and expectations.
Absolutely. So it sounds like discovering the term asexual like really like set you free in a lot of ways of societal expectations.
Oh yeah.
That we all have grown up with.
Yeah. And it took me a long time, even after first hearing that term, for me to think of it as a term for myself. Because for the longest time, I thought perhaps there was just something medically wrong with me. Because I have a host of other medical issues. And I thought maybe it was just because of one of those, or because of one of the medications I was taking. And it seemed like when I was in high school, maybe my libido was a little bit higher. And it took a lot of work to recognize that, no, when I was in high school, it wasn't that I enjoyed the sex any more than I do now. It was just that I was a lot more brainwashed by this idea that my worth was tied into the sex I was having.
Yeah. And I assume now, like, having perspective on that, your self-worth is tied to whatever the fuck you want it to be tied to for yourself instead of that nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that self-worth is not tied into any one thing.
Yeah.
Self-worth is kind of inherent to all people, and it's not based on what you can give others. And so it took a really long time for me to get that through my thick skull. But eventually I got there, and I'm still getting there. It's like still an active thing I have to remind myself, because there are times that I'll get into a new relationship and the person won't handle the news that I actually truly don't want to have sex more poorly than they said they would. Unfortunately, there are people in the world that you can be really honest with, upfront with, tell them your boundaries, and they'll be like, okay, yeah, that's fine. And then a few weeks or a few months later, they'll be like, well, yeah, you said that, but I thought you would change your mind when you spent more time with me, because it's me.
Right. All right, calm down over there.
Yeah. Yep. But it's not about any individual person, so that's not possible.
Right.
I could meet the sexiest, most perfect person in the universe, and it still wouldn't change how I'm designed. Like, how I naturally am. So, but when I'm confronted with those, sometimes I do get self-conscious and down on myself, and I have to remind myself that it's them. It's them that have not listened to my boundaries, and they're taking their own entitlement out on me, and it's not me that's broken.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we haven't even talked about your profession and always being seen as a sex object 100% of the time professionally.
Yeah. So I am a sex worker. I do live streaming on a camgirl website. I do sexting. I do phone sex. I sell videos. I sell photo sets. And all of that is explicitly sexual. And I am also a burlesque dancer. Mm-hmm. And I'm also in a community of friends who are very involved in kink and sex positive. And so my life really does revolve around sex quite a bit, for the fact that I am not very interested in it, in a personal, in my vagina sense. Mm-hmm. But I think because of the fact that I am on the asexual spectrum, it has driven me to become interested in sex in a much more nuanced way, in like an academic way, in an emotional way, in a mental way. And all of that makes me able to create my work, my streams, and my content, I think maybe in a different way than most models do, but in a way that is received very well by the clients that I have. And I love the work because I don't get really distracted by my own sexual wants and needs, and I can focus entirely on my clients.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've talked to other models in the past, especially new models, who say that they get really frustrated sometimes because especially live streaming, like the clients will come before they get to, and then they'll leave, and then they'll be really frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really have to deal with that because I am doing it completely for them.
Yeah.
And maybe some of my clients would be put off knowing that I don't have much sexual attraction on my own. I do present a character that is much more sexually invested than I personally am in real life. But I think that because I am never in it just for my own pleasure, and I am really focusing every second on what they like, what will get them off, everything that they could possibly desire. I think that helps. I think that, like, it makes it at least just as enjoyable for them.
Yeah. How did you get into sex work to begin with?
Well, I think it's a long story, sort of. I think I've kind of always been destined for sex work.
Really?
I grew up in a very sex-positive home. I was, from a very young age, very interested in strippers. I didn't really understand what they did or, like, the mechanisms of their jobs. But I remember seeing them in movies sometimes and thought they had very cool outfits, and I loved their clear shoes. They're like Cinderella shoes, and I always wanted them. And my dad was always like, "You're not allowed to have shoes like that." And I was like, "Why? I want them." And he just wouldn't explain. And still to this day, I love those shoes. I love them. And so I think in my head, it was always, like, intriguing to me. Every time I saw a depiction of sex work in movies or on TV, I was like, that's kind of cool. And in college, I did nude modeling, which isn't sex work, but it made me become very comfortable and confident in being in a room full of strangers looking at my naked body, like really looking, like staring at every solitary inch, like really putting to paper every detail. And, like, that was fine. And then I started doing burlesque, and I loved the thrill of that exhibitionism. And then when I was going to start my master's, it was a struggle for me to figure out how to pay for it. And it made sense to do cam work. It was such an easy job to do at night when I had classes all throughout the day.
Yeah.
And to make my own schedule, and it was lucrative, and I found I really had a knack for it. And then when I graduated my master's program, I ended up wanting to do cam work instead of what I actually got a master's in. So that's just what I've been doing instead.
Yeah. I love the evolution of how, like, one thing led to another, and, like, the constant intrigue of that. And you said that you, like, grew up in a very sex positive household growing up. Like, what does that, I guess, look like?
So I don't remember if it was a TV show or something else, but I remember listening to something where someone was talking about a naked household versus a clothed household. And asked, like, some character or something was asking, "Oh, did you grow up in a naked household or did you grow up in a clothed household?" And the other character was like, "A clothed household, obviously. What are you talking about?" And that struck me so much because I grew up in a naked household. Not so much my dad. My dad was always clothed, but there was 3 women in my household, and we were always kind of unclothed. It was very natural. My mom is a bit of a hippie. And so there was a lot of body positivity where, like, it was fine to be in the bathroom, like someone using the toilet while someone was taking a shower, or, like, being naked, brushing your teeth, doing your makeup, whatever. And when my sister and I got to an age where it was likely that we would start thinking about other people in a sexual way, our mom was very candid about sexuality with us, and not just straight sex, but also queer sex, and talking about, like, if you want to have sex with a guy, let me know. I can get you condoms. If you want to have sex with women, even better. You probably don't even need condoms. I'd prefer you to do that. So it was like, and that was like when I was 11, 12, 13. It was so early.
Mm-hmm.
It was before I really even started thinking about relationships with other people. And it wasn't pushy. It wasn't like she was advocating for us to do anything. She was saying that if we wanted to, we could, and that it was okay and natural, and that there were just some things that we should think about in advance so that we didn't harm ourselves or anyone else in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm forever grateful for that, because it meant when I did become an age where I wanted to start exploring things, I knew exactly what to do, and I wasn't scared, and I could talk to the adults in my life about what I needed. I don't think my mom necessarily intended for me to become a sex worker when I grew up, but she's still supportive of it.
So she knows.
Yeah, she knows.
Yeah.
She hasn't seen my content or anything, but
sure.
But she knows, and she says she's proud of me, and so it's very wholesome.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And yeah, so I'm really fortunate that I didn't have these oppressive messages about sexuality when I grew up, and I think that really helped me to be able to pursue this career.
Mm-hmm.
Although it's interesting because I also think in part that it hindered me from being able to realize I was asexual.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
There were so many positive messages about sex.
Yeah.
And it was just so expected that I would have sex.
Yeah.
And that it would be like a fun thing, that it didn't even occur to me that I wouldn't. And I don't think that was anyone's fault. Like, there aren't that many asexual people, or maybe there are, but I haven't met that many, so
yeah.
I don't think that, like, anyone could have foretold that, like, I wouldn't be as into it
right
as other teenagers and young adults. But eventually I figured it out, and it all turned out fine.
Yeah. It definitely strikes me as the difference between being sexual and wanting to be sexy, right?
Yeah. I consider myself a very sensual person by nature, and I don't consider that the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
I was actually talking about this with someone recently, where I think we need better language about sexuality, because there is a difference between sex, sexual attraction, and sexiness.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have sexual attraction. Like, I don't look at people and ever imagine having sex with them. I don't ever, and have never, looked at porn for arousal. I've never fantasized, ever.
Yeah.
I have had sex. I've had plenty of sex. I've had over 50 sexual partners. And a large part of that is because all my life I've had people tell me, oh, you just need to find the right person and it'll be fun. And I have tried. I have tried 50 plus times and no avail.
Yeah.
And then there's sexiness, and I love expressing sensuality and sexiness.
Mm-hmm.
It is so fun to me. I love the expression of femininity. I am definitely an exhibitionist, which feels exciting and maybe verges on sexual, but it's hard for me to really know because I don't know.
Yeah.
But I definitely get a lot of enjoyment out of, like, wearing short dress and high heels and like having pouty lips and walking with my hips swaying back and forth and knowing that people are reacting. It is challenging, or at the very least, it is complicated to have a desire to be sexy when you don't have much of a desire to have sex.
Yeah.
Because as much as I love that exhibitionism, I have to really toe the line and not tease people to the extent where they're being led on. And we live in a very entitlement-heavy world, especially men. Unfortunately, a lot of men are taught from a young age that they are entitled to women's bodies. And so when I walk around looking how I like to look, I do find that men often look at me and think, like, oh, she's looking for attention and she wants me to want to fuck her.
Yeah.
And that's not what I want. I just, like, if I could walk around like that invisible, I would. It's not even necessarily about being perceived so much as I want to be able to perceive myself that way.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's nice being perceived by other people, but I wish that there was a safe way to be like, this is just for looking, not for touching.
Yeah. And you would think that, I mean, that would be just commonplace of like, obviously, we're all just for looking and not for fucking touching, you know? Yeah. But unfortunately, we're not quite there yet.
Yeah. That's a big benefit of camming because I am at my house, I'm alone in a room, and I can be extraordinarily sensual and no one can touch me.
Oh.
Even if they wanted to. I mean, they definitely want to.
Right.
But it's impossible for anyone to engage with me sexually in a way that I don't want them to. So I think that's what makes me love the job so much, or one of the reasons, because I can wear the things that make me feel really confident, and I get plenty of compliments, and I do the things that I want, say the things that I want, and the people who are accessing my services are consenting to that. Like, they're looking for that kind of interaction, and no one's hurt that they're not actually having sex with me.
Right.
And so it's like mutual satisfaction.
Yeah.
And I generally don't actually see anyone, so it doesn't matter that I'm not sexually attracted to them, because obviously no one expects me to be sexually attracted to words on a computer screen. So it feels a lot more genuine interacting that way. Like, I don't advertise that I'm asexual, but it doesn't have to come up, and it doesn't feel like I'm being a liar at all.
Right. That's so cool to hear, like, how you also get a lot of enjoyment out of sex work, even though you're not a very sexual person in that way. Like, there's still so many benefits for you. And I just love hearing that. That's awesome. Yeah.
Like,
and that is like the ultimate like exhibitionism as well, like in a lot of ways, of like always putting yourself out there on camming, and you never know who's like looking and whatnot and interacting with you. Yeah. But you get to do exactly what you want, and you have total control of of the situation, and in no way can anybody like violate your boundaries, and if they do, then you can block them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And people are constantly asking, like, oh, do you really like doing this, or do you just need the money? I'm like, I really enjoy doing this. Like, I could do, like, I have a master's degree in something completely unrelated. I could do something else if I wanted to.
Yeah.
But this is the best.
Yeah.
This is great. I can make my own hours. I can wear all of the sexy lingerie that I have a problem. I have so much. I can't help myself. I really have a large collection of lingerie, of shoes, of clothes. It's absurd at this point, but it gives me an excuse to wear them all and feel like that collection is functional rather than problematic. And it's great.
Excellent.
Yeah. And like the whole time I'm working, I'm having people be like, oh my God, you're so great. Oh, like, I love your eyes. I love the way your voice sounds. I love like how you look, blah, blah, blah. Like you make me feel so good. And I love making people feel good. So it's good. It's just like, it's a really great experience. And I have met online now a lot of asexual cam girls.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
That's
cool. I think it's actually very common.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
Do they have like similar feelings as you do as far as their relation with their sex work?
I haven't been able to talk super in depth with them, but it does seem like there's this feeling that like we're going to be sexualized anyways.
Yeah.
Like there's really no controlling that. And so we might as well work it to our advantage. I think this kind of goes into kink as well. Like the things that you experience in life that can be a little bit traumatic because you don't want them to happen and you can't really control them. If you can instead make them empowering, that can really transform them for you. And so I think I can't speak for every asexual who does sex work, but I think a lot of us feel like we are taking something that has been really hurtful to us since we were much younger and transforming it into something that gives us a lot more freedom, financial independence, time independence, and allowing ourselves to have a lot more boundaries with it because we can press that button to log off at any time. We can block a customer at any time. There's so much control that online models have. Mm-hmm. Like we can say no to any request. We don't have to do things. Like I don't even do penetration in my shows. Occasionally I'll do fingering, but I just don't use toys inside of me at all, ever. Because I just don't feel like it.
Yeah.
And people will still pay a lot of money for me to do other things. And it is so empowering to know that I can use something that has always disadvantaged me to my advantage, finally.
Yeah. That's amazing. Oh, I love that for you. That's awesome. I would love to talk about your queerness.
Okay. Well, I'm queer in quite a few ways. I am, always switch between calling myself bisexual and pansexual. I don't really see a difference between the two personally. I know some people are really adamant about the difference between the two, but I see bisexual as interested in my own gender and other genders, and pansexual as interested in any gender. And so each fits. So, but I also have kind of weirdness with those terms in general because they are, the base word is sexual.
Right.
Which I'm not.
Right.
So I have been kind of leaning towards biromantic or panromantic.
Oh, I love that. I haven't heard that before.
And then asexual, obviously.
Yeah.
And I've known that I have been biromantic since I was very young. I remember being 5, 6, 7, watching The Munsters and having the biggest crush on Lily Munster. Ivana DiCarlo is gorgeous. If you have never seen her out of her spooky makeup, it's just stunning. All those old Hollywood stars are just dreamy. And I had more girl crushes when I was growing up than crushes on boys. Probably because I spent more time with girls, maybe, or just I'm very queer. I don't know. My first 2 relationships were both with girls, although they were very middle school-esque. We were a little too scared to kiss, but they were still very cute. It wasn't until probably 13 or so that I started wondering about my gender identity. And even then, it was not really wondering about it, but I started watching drag queens on TV and in the movies and stuff and being why is this so intriguing? I want to be a drag queen. And I kept having people be you can't be a drag queen. You have to be a drag king because you're a girl. And I was no, I don't want to be a drag king. That doesn't make any sense. I want to be a drag queen. I like femininity.
Yeah.
I just want to be in gigantic heels and the big makeup big wigs and all of that. And they're like, well, that's for men and you're not one. And I was like, I don't know about that, but okay. And so I guess I just sort of was like, okay, well, I guess that's that. End of discussion on that. And I didn't really think too hard about it. And then eventually discovered burlesque, which is basically drag for women. And also, I mean, it doesn't have to just be women, but it is an expression of high femininity with all the glitz and glamour, but more accepting of female-bodied individuals who still want to be femme. And so I did that. But this idea of like, I want to be a drag queen has still kind of been like rocking in my brain. And it hasn't been until recently that so many people have been coming out as non-binary or genderqueer or whatever, that it's just kind of dawned on me that, like, gender doesn't really suit me. Especially this idea of being a woman. But being, like, a man in this society is also, like, cringy because there are very few men in the world that I like. Just kidding. There is probably quite a few men that I like, but there's a lot that I don't. Especially about traditional masculinity. And I'm still figuring out gender stuff, and that's been an interesting journey. But I'm really grateful that the questioning of gender and exploration of gender has been so public and so celebrated, I guess, in queer communities in the last few years, because it's really given me space to think about it and think about it slowly at my own pace without having to come to any grand decisions about it, and ultimately just be comfortable with the idea that I, for the most part, really like my body. I love that it enables me to pick the career path that I have and do pretty well at what I do, and yet still able to explore other gender days when I feel like it.
What does that look like for you when you're exploring other gender days?
I've only just begun my exploration, and so it is an ongoing process, but I am beginning to buy some more masculine fitting clothing that doesn't reveal my narrow waist or my breasts as much. I have a lot of friends who are gender non-binary or just very open to exploring the spectrum of gender. And so when I spend time with them, I'm able to kind of play with my own gender and display my more masculine traits. And like I said, it's an ongoing process. So like, who knows what it'll look like in a few months from now and a year from now and 2 years from now. But because it is so talked about and so, I guess, common now, it's given me a lot of confidence to make this journey and to just see where it leads me without feeling like I have to just know right now, this instant, what I am, who I am, how I want to present, and getting too in my head about it.
Yeah. I do. I definitely feel that. There can be a lot of pressure on labels of like, what are you? And are you this or that? Or you have to have it all figured out right now to be able to have any interaction with anybody ever, you know, and that's like a lot of pressure to figure out, especially when the spectrums continue to widen. Every day it feels like, you know, I'm learning new words and I'm learning new ways people can identify and do identify. And that just continues to expand as it's a conversation that we're having more and more often in a bigger and bigger way societally, which is exciting to me. I mean, sexuality and identities of any kind, gender and romantic and relationship style and whatever, like it is a constant evolution because we are constantly evolving because we live in this world and we're always butting up against other people, and that changes our minds on things and makes it like forces us to evolve. So why wouldn't these other things, these other aspects of us also evolve in time? And I love what you said about having a community that they really prioritize and appreciate that fluidity themselves. And so therefore it allows you to feel comfortable and confident to play with it too.
Yeah.
It really is amazing how much of a difference like having a supportive, open community like that can be for people. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, awesome. Is there anything else that you want to cover before we start wrapping up the conversation?
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about my views on sex work because this is a podcast about sexuality, and I think that there are a lot of misconceptions about sex work and views on the validity of sex work, both on like whether it's a valid job and also whether people should be accessing it. I have heard, even from people that I know and generally think of as decent, progressive people, like, oh, I would never pay for porn, or like, I don't understand why anyone would go to a sex worker. That's kind of pathetic, or like things like that, which is really unfortunate to me because what I have seen over my now almost 6 years working as a sex worker is that it can be really healing to people.
Yeah.
The clients that I get aren't pathetic people. They're just normal people. They're just generally either individuals who have a very specific kink that it is challenging to find people in the non-online world to fulfill, which is valid, or they are in a situation in which they're not getting their needs met, which is also very valid. I would definitely prefer that everyone utilizing my services are doing it in a consensual way where if they have a partner, their partner knows that they are accessing pornography, and specifically live pornography, because sometimes in the context of certain relationships that is considered cheating. But I have seen it really positively impactful for people. I have had clients that have told me that they've had really big mental breakthroughs because of the sessions I've had with them where we've done a role play that is based in something very personal to them, very emotional, and being able to work through that for them helps them feel less shame about it.
Can you give me a for instance?
So, for instance, I had a client who is a person of color, and they had a breeding fetish. And while I have no personal interest in ever having children myself, I am fine with catering to people with breeding fetishes, which is someone wanting to role play impregnating me. I have very wide hips. My mom calls them baby making hips. Like, I just have a body that looks
right
like it was designed to yield children. And so I do have a lot of customers who come to me for that kind of thing. And so I had this client who is a person of color, and we had a session. We did the role play. And afterwards, I was able to talk to him about why this particular fetish was important to him. And he said that he cried after we did it because it meant so much to him. And the reason it meant so much to him was because as a person of color, he had it drilled into his head that white people were always supposed to dominate him and his family. And like he had family, like generational trauma in which family members had been raped by white people, and that basically white breeding had taken place in his family, and to be able to role play doing an activity like that with a white model helped him work through some of that trauma, and it made him feel as though he was the dominant race, that he was able to be the one to impregnate a white woman. And I had no idea any of this when we did the role play, but I was glad that it was so helpful and impactful to him.
Yeah.
And I've had other people who had interest in having sex with other men, and they felt like maybe it made them gay, and they felt really shameful about that. And so we did a role play in which I told them to have sex with a guy for my benefit. It's like enforced by is the fetish. And so I was there encouraging it, and because of that, it helped that client feel like it was okay, like it wasn't really him who wanted it. And over the session, it helped him be able to do those desires or imagine those desires without all the shame that came with feeling like maybe he was gay and shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And I think later on that client came back and wanted a session where it was just a threesome and there was no encouragement from me. And so I think he was like slowly working towards accepting himself and not having that shame, which was beautiful to see.
That's awesome.
And so I guess I just wanted to touch on the fact that sex work has a lot of value in that you can work through a lot of sexual trauma with professionals. Sex workers are professionals. They're not therapists. We are not trained to deal with trauma. We're not trained to work with mental breakdowns or severe issues in any way. But there's still healing that can be done with that intimate interaction that a lot of men don't have access to otherwise. And I think there's something really unique and beautiful about sex work because men are so much more likely to go to a cam girl than they ever are to therapy. I think that they are able to access like a really loving, intimate, safe relationship with a cam girl, and they aren't able to access that. So I guess what I want to leave the audience with is that if we stop stigmatizing sex workers and sex work, we can create an environment for people where they can access services they need, whether it's because they're lonely or because they have a kink or interest that no one around them can provide for them, or because they want a professional to be able to lead them through a very intimate and maybe even scary to them role play. We can create a environment where people are able to access these services and really flourish, get the things they need without feeling shameful, develop healthier sexualities, become more confident in what they want and need sexually, be able to communicate more effectively with their partners, and so many other things. So I hope that listeners will start thinking about everyone who accesses and pays for sex work as pathetic, if they do already, and stop seeing sex workers as workers who have a easy job or make easy money, because it's not. It takes a lot of skill, a lot of patience, empathy, and understanding of human desire, of sales, modeling, marketing, technology, acting for sure. And there's a lot to it, and even more to be explored if we give it the time and space to do so.
Well, fuck yeah. Thank you so much for sitting down with us today and being willing to be open with yourself and your experiences. And I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for letting me talk and listening and being a rad person.
Woo! How fucking rad was that conversation? I learned so much throughout that whole interview. I don't know about y'all, but I was just fascinated from start to finish. She is a beautiful human inside and out, and I'm so excited that you guys got to witness part of that with me. I really loved her talking about what she enjoys about doing sex work and how she finds it so empowering and so much fun, and like she has total control of herself and the situations, and she gets to in some way write the narrative for the sexual experiences that she has in her life when so many of them in the past have not been within her control, and how her and so many other sex workers value doing sex work because it's a way of them being able to control that in their own lives in a better way. I thought that was really powerful and really beautiful to hear about. So thank you again, Feluria, for being so fucking great. And next time I will be in Connecticut talking with West, and they are non-binary and a beautiful trans human that I adore with my entire being. And we really get into all of the nitty-gritty goodness of what their experience is being non-binary, being trans, and I just can't wait for you guys to listen in. So again, one last time, I do have a Patreon. Check it out. Patreon.com/sexwitheveryone if you would like to support me and this podcast that I am absolutely in love with. And yeah, I hope you have a beautiful next couple weeks. And until I talk to you again, stay awesome, friends.